So we got one of those sad reminders about life and living for the moment. One of our fellow nomads on YouTube passed away, and this is the second one that I didn't follow him real closely, but he was his name, or he went by on YouTube, box truck Cory, and he had a box truck he'd converted into an RV. But he's the second nomadic YouTuber that I followed that has passed away from a terminal illness, and they started actually traveling once they were diagnosed. So I think it's just it's a sad story, but at the same time, I'm glad they got to get out on the road, and enjoy their life as much as they possibly could. But it's always one of those reminders that you got to do things now. Don't put them off, And I think I with Terry's help, I think we do live that way pretty well. Most people would never have jumped on the road like we did without being officially retired and having a big nest egg and all that. But we make it work. If we had waited, I'm not sure whether we could do this. But anyway, I digress. So we are in northwestern Florida, and of course I think of northwestern Florida as being like the Panhandle, this huge area you've got off to the northwest. But we aren't quite that far north, and we're about 50 miles to the west of Gainesville, and it's a really interesting area. Florida has a lot of limestone underlying it, and I'm sure you've seen stories of sinkholes and stuff like that. In fact, if you're buying property down here, you got to be careful. You don't want to buy something on a sinkhole. But that type of geology has a lot of caves and springs and different things that go on with water, and that's how sinkholes form. Actually, is from the action of the groundwater. But so where we are is Hart Springs Campground, inexpensive, nice campground, and good place for us. Got full hookups. We got time to do all the laundry and everything else. And so we've spent a couple of weeks here, and the springs are pretty. You could swim in them, and there's fish and turtles and that kind of thing. But these springs, they make a channel basically from where the spring comes up, then it flows on to the west into the Suwannee River. So all along the Suwannee River, on both sides of it, are springs that feed into the river. And one of the things that goes on with these springs is that in some of them, the manatees will use that water, which is a constant 72 degrees, they'll use that to stay warm in the wintertime. And so they'll come into these springs at night, and then they kind of go back out into the river a little bit during the daytime. So I wanted to see manatees. So Terry and I found out that the best place is, of course, the one named Manatee Springs, right? So we went down to check it out. And sure enough, I could see the manatees. I walked along a boardwalk, and I could see the manatees out in the Suwanne River. But the best way to actually get to see them was going to be to rent a kayak and float the river, or the spring inlet or outlet, and see if I could catch some manatees. So we just goofed around, and Terry wasn't up for renting a kayak that day, and I didn't have my camera or anything. So we had lunch. I ate the boiled peanuts, which, man, I liked them, It turned out to be pretty good, I thought. It's kind of a southern thing, and Terry didn't care for them. She didn't like them at all. But I did. They were good. They reminded me of mashed potatoes a little bit in their flavor. So certainly not for everybody, but I enjoyed it. So anyway, like I say, I wanted to get some video of the manatees, so I went back the next day, rented a kayak, and floated down where the spring flows into the Suwannee River, and I just drifted past turtles and great blue heron just standing on the bank watching me float by. And I made it out to where this thing flows into the river, and it turns out that when you're actually in the water, it's hard to see the manatees. It's easier to see them if you're up above. But anyway, I did manage to get a little footage of the manatees, and pretty fascinating animals. They are mammals, so they're warm-blooded, they have hair, and of course they feed their young milk. And just kind of interesting to see some of these things that seem almost alien to me because of never encountering them ever. But anyway, we've enjoyed this area, and well worth a few weeks hanging around here. Anyway, thanks for watching.